The question you might be thinking to yourself is, if you are a mortgage broker, residential or commercial, any part of the industry, you might be thinking to yourself, or even a lender, why in the world do you care about the property tour? Why am I bothered talking about this? You need to understand how the property operates. Your goal in all of this is to maximize the NOI, maximize the revenues, minimize the expenses, maximize the NOI. To do that effectively, you need to understand how the property operates. Let's assume it's an acquisition. The seller of the property may have operated the property in one way. You might come across the property and look at it in a very different light. You might want to change any number of these different factors, which could dramatically change either the income or the expenses. That's in the future. For this conversation right now, for your originations process of the mortgage, you want to understand how the property should be operating right now. And sometimes when you look through either the income or the expense financials on the historical basis, you come across a number, parking, on the revenue side. Why is he getting so much parking income? You might want to question. You might see he's got a huge expense for gates. What's going on with the property that they're paying so much for gating? Why do you even need the gate? Well, sometimes when you go on that property tour, it answers some of those questions. So it is absolutely directly relevant to everything that you're doing as a mortgage professional. The better you are at your job, the more you'll value this property tour. And if you're not able to go on that property tour because the property's not near you, it might be far away, or you're just unable to be on the property tour at the date that it's available, then you want to make sure the borrower understands a lot of these elements and has gone on this property tour and can talk to you about a lot of these different factors. Obviously, this is slightly more valuable and more pertinent if you're the borrower, but I promise you, as a mortgage broker, this is really important to understand. And the more you understand this, the more you can answer questions, the more you can understand different documents that are going to be needed, the more you can help advise your borrower on how to maximize revenue and minimize expenses. Or it could be the opposite. It could be you could say, hey, listen, I just went on a property tour and there's a lot of deferred maintenance. I didn't realize that until I went on the property tour. There's a tremendous amount of deferred maintenance to the roofs. I know you showed me pictures, but I didn't see it in the pictures. And once I got to the property and I went up to the roof, I realized, oh my gosh, they're going to have to redo roofs within the next 12 months, right? Similarly with any of these features. So let's walk through this a little bit and I'll explain what I look for when I go on a property tour and how I go on a property tour. And then I think it'll just fit into your education and your knowledge of commercial real estate, and you'll figure out how you want to apply it. I think this is something that just sits in the back of your brain, and the next time you're into a deal, it's going to spark a question. Like, oh, I remember that video and how we asked that question and that comment. That's what I'm hoping comes out of this. I'm not expecting that you decide you want to take your girlfriend, your wife, your spouse, your partner, and go on some property tours for fun. That's only me and my life. Don't follow my example. When I go on a property tour, and this is how I was taught. I was taught by a man named Bob Kremp. Bob Kremp was 65 years old, had been in the industry for 40 years by the time I went to work under him. And I was in my young 30s at the time, and he taught me everything. And he probably went on 1,000 property tours up in the New Jersey, Northeast region of the country. And he was the master at it. There was nobody better, probably still to this day. And Bob has passed away since, but I miss him dearly, and he taught me everything I know. When you first get to the property, go to the top. I'm assuming for the moment this is a multifamily property. That's my specialty. I'm going to talk about what I know best. But a lot of this will carry forward into all the other property asset types. You just have to adjust a few things here and there. When I go to a property, I always go up to the roof. Start at the top, you're going to work your way down. You're going to go up, really you're dealing with the exterior first. That's just what you see that, before you go inside, often you deal with the exterior. Because if you don't like the exterior or you see some big flags in the exterior, you might not even bother going in. On the exterior, I'm going to go up to the roof. I'm just looking for, do I see any drainage issues? Does the roof look well maintained? Very often you're going to have, either there's going to be kind of an angular roof, at which point you're not going up to the roof, or there is more of a flat roof. And sometimes it can be misleading because from the road, it looks like there's an angle to it. And then you get up there and you realize that was just a fake facade. It's actually a flat roof or portion of flat roof. And this is certainly going to be common in commercial, almost every property, right? Because they have HVAC systems that are often sitting up on the roof, or elevators that have mechanical facilities up on the roof. So usually the roofs are flat and you can access them. You're looking for the condition of the roof. Again, it's a big problem. Roofs are expensive. They need to be maintained. It's a longer term, I forget the numbers, but 10, 15, 20-year lifespan of a typical roof. But as you get more experience in the industry, you'll go up to the roof and very quickly, you'll just notice what it's made out of and you'll know the names of this. You'll know the average lifespan. You'll know what a well-constructed roof or well-maintained roof looks like. You'll know what it looks like towards the end of its useful life, and you'll see patches and cracks and everything else, and you'll get a feeling for that. It's really just sparking your concern that you might need to have a one-time factor of capital that needs to be put into the property to renovate the roof now. It might be something that's just a red flag. You're looking at all the deferred maintenance on the property. The roofs have not been properly maintained by the seller. So you put on your thing you put on your list of items, within the next 18 months, you're going to need a new roof. The lender's going to notice that as well, because it's probably going to come up in an appraisal. But you also just might want to know there are some things with the roof. Maybe you just put it in your capital reserves number, or you just put it in your general repair and maintenance number. And that's going to apply with all of these. Windows, you're just looking at the window sills, you're looking at the condition of the windows, you're looking for leaking and cracking at the edge of the windows. Once you look for this and you're doing acquisitions a while, you can begin to see what it looks like when windows are having leaks. Because that's really where most water intrusion problems occur, near the window sills, the corners towards the bottom. I keep making this note because that's what it looks like. And that's what you're looking on windows. Again, could also be the functionality of the windows. Older windows, windows style changes. Literally, the style of windows change, not just the mechanical and functionality, but just the style of them changes, let alone the functionality of the windows. Certainly, if you're looking in the Northeast, you're more concerned with the insulation factor of older windows versus newer windows. And that certainly could be a fact that, hey, we're going to replace the windows because they, there's a new style. It'll modernize the look and feel of the property. And B, it'll improve the insulating factor, and we can reduce our heating costs. Parking. Does the property have adequate parking? Sometimes properties had different zoning when they were built than where they are today, and they had either fewer or greater number of parking units that were required 20 years ago than they are today. You just want to be aware of that as that has changed. You're just looking at the lot. The parking lot itself, is it in good condition, right? You've all been to these properties where parking lots are just in shambles. There's holes and there's cracks. It brings down the whole appeal of the property versus a new property parking lot that has been recently striped and has the curbs well designated and painted, and there's no crack in concrete. It's just a factor you need. Again, is it a one-time deferred maintenance cost? Is it something that's going to have to be done during the life of the loan term of the property? Or is it just something that you want to make sure it's included in the repair and maintenance number? Fencing and gating. So fencing would be literally a perimeter fence around the property. Some fences, depending on where the property is located, sometimes this is a real security feature. You want a fence around the property. You don't want people to be able to come in and out of the property very easily. Sometimes it's just not even a thought. Why in the world would you put a fence around the property? Sometimes there's a gate on the driveway. Before people can come in, there's an electronic gate. Those things break all the time. So make sure you have in your R&M, your repair and maintenance expense item, money for the gate. And you might not have realized that until you went on the property tour. Oh, I didn't realize this property had a gate. Now that you see the gate, well, you might got to make sure that is it working? What's the age of the gate? And you might want to make sure, has the gate had a lot of problems? You might ask the property manager. And so, oh yeah, this gate's it's always a problem. It's broken half the time. Or no, it works really well. You just want to understand that because it's going to affect your R&M number, your repair and maintenance number. Drainage. Drainage can be a killer. So what you're looking at, again, I'm thinking of multifamily property. I'm thinking of a property, with some landscaping that comes right up to the property. And you want to just notice, does it look to you like the landscaping kind of leans into the property so the water would be draining towards the property? A definite no-no. You want to make sure that the property sits a little bit higher and that the water looks like it would properly drain away. Obviously, in my experience, I'm thinking on the East Coast where we have rain. If you're out west, this is probably not as much of an issue. But I'll give you an example of a story here because this is really interesting. I was once involved with a property down in Florida in the Tampa Bay Clearwater area. And we toured that property in the winter when there's not as much rain in the winter. It's always raining in Florida, but certainly in the Tampa Bay area, it's not South Florida. It's not Miami and Fort Lauderdale. There's not as much rain up in the Tampa region. And certainly in the winter, it doesn't rain as much. We toured the property in the winter. It looked great. The client bought the property. The day we bought the property and they sat down at the property manager's desk, there were some photos in the desk of the property manager that showed the property completely flooded. Completely flooded. We didn't know what to make of it. Sure enough, come the summertime and the heavy rains came and the property flooded. Well, how did that get missed? Because we were in the winter, we didn't see any drainage problems. There was no evidence of it. Nobody mentioned it to us. We didn't see the pictures. They didn't volunteer the pictures. We didn't even think to ask. And there was no reason to think that there was a drainage problem. But there had been historically a major drainage problem that they could not fix. It actually came from, in Florida, there are these canals. There's so much water. There are these canals that run all over the place. And sometimes you don't even see them. You're driving over them all the time or next to them. You don't even very often don't realize that every once in a while you hear a story of an alligator came out of a canal and caused some problems. But in this particular problem, kind of beyond the fence of the property, in the back of the property, there was a small canal. And that canal was relatively empty at the time we toured it. We didn't even see it, but was usually relatively empty. It was also overgrown. The canal wasn't properly maintained by the city. And so what would happen is the drainage pipes off of the parking area has drains, and the water would go into those drains. The problem was that the pipes couldn't drain properly into the canal. So it would back up into the property and flood all the time. And the tenants were used to it. The tenants knew that if it was going to rain, they'd pull their cars up into a certain area of the property because they knew the rain didn't get up that high just from their experience of living on the property. But we didn't know, and the borrower didn't know. And so it caused a real problem. They spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to fix the drainage. I don't think they ever actually got it fixed because the city didn't come out and refused to come out for whatever reason and fix the drainage pool. Whatever, nightmare. Drainage is an issue. And not just at that property, but at many, many properties in the Northeast and throughout. You want to make sure that there's no drainage issues. Ask the hard questions. And it's just an example of why it's so important to see a property through all of the cycles. And I know you're not going to have time to see the property. You're not going to be dealing with this deal throughout the whole 12 months. But you want to look into the numbers. And you want to do it. That's why it's also good to see a couple years worth of numbers. And you're looking at your grounds cost, your repair and maintenance cost for any anomalies that might be there. And don't just let the seller or the property manager brush it off. If you notice an anomaly, dig down into that. What really happened? Because you never know when there's a hidden problem that it's going to be difficult to uncover. Siding just means the brick or the siding of the property. What's the condition of that? Sometimes this could be especially in properties that are made out of wood versus concrete, meaning in Florida, it's usually concrete block. As you go further up the coast, it's usually wooden properties. There could be termite issues or ant issues buried underneath the siding. The siding looks great, but little did you know that right underneath the siding, it's completely rotted out because of termites. Again, how are you going to notice that? You'll notice perhaps in the utility cost or the R&M cost, exterminator. And if it seems unusually high, you might want to ask on that. You might just want to ask the question, hey, do you have any termite or bug or infestation problems here? And just notice the body language of the people that are talking to you. That's exterior. Let's look at common areas. So your common area is really everything that's not, is really on the interior, but everything that's not a unit. That's how I think about it. All your common areas, your heating and your cooling. I could have put HVAC, I just wrote HVAC, which stands for heating, ventilation, and cooling. But I separate these out to make sure that you're looking at each one specifically. Heating could be oil, could be gas. One of the first properties I was ever involved in was a very large property up in New Jersey. It was a $105 million loan. I think the property was $130, $150 million, 1,000 units up in the New Jersey area. And it was built in 1945, the late 40s, early 50s, I believe. And it had centralized boilers still, very common in the Northeast. From DC north, a lot of these older properties have centralized boilers. It was just a very efficient way. You go into the basement of the building or the basement of the garden style kind of block, and there'll be a gigantic boiler in that basement that pumps out steam or pumps out hot boiling water through the radiators of the property. Very common. In this particular property, those boilers were old. They always need maintenance and always need repairs, and you have to pay for the oil, which is expensive. And gas is so much cheaper and so much more efficient all around. And the property owner decided to shut down all the boilers and install heaters, gas-fired heaters in each unit. It looked like a little square unit. It looked like a little fridge that would just sit in the living room or something of the property, or maybe there had to be one or two of them. And they were able to do two different things with this. And this is why just these questions and these thoughts are so important. They were able to shut down all those boilers, shut down the oil cost, shut down the maintenance cost. It just saved tens of thousands of dollars, both in the extra utility cost of paying for oil and in the repair and maintenance number. And then these units were extremely efficient. And more than that, they were now on the interior of the homes. The owner could now easily pass that through as a utility that the customer paid, that the client, that the tenant paid. Not only that, when you have centralized boilers, the tenants are not turning on and off their heat. It's either on or it's off. I lived in Manhattan for many years. I didn't control my heat. It was either on or off. And the law used to be in Manhattan, I don't know if it's the same now, once it gets below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, the owners of the property are legally have to turn on the heat. And once they turn it on, it doesn't go back off until the spring. So that's why property can get really hot. Nowadays, I'm sure there's better controls, and a lot of properties have just switched over to gas. But just another example of why heating and cooling is extremely important to recognize. Certainly in different climates, different parts of the country, you're going to be looking at the condition of both of these. Security, again, different parts of town might want to make sure there's security apparatus, cameras in place, how are those recorded, where is that being kept, are they digital, are they old tapes, how is that being maintained? Electric, this is the electric into the properties. This is very common as you deal with older properties. You get to aluminum wiring on properties that were built in the 40s and 50s. In most cases, it's all been ripped out and replaced with copper. But if you come across an older property, you want to ask and just make sure it doesn't still have aluminum wiring. Why? Aluminum wiring had more electrical issues, more fire issues. So it was always problematic. And like I said, in most cases, it's all been ripped out. And I'm going back 20 years ago. By now, I'm sure it's all gone. The lobby area, just what's the lobby look like? If there is a lobby, if there is a leasing room or a leasing area where the managers sit, what's that space look like? Are there storage closets to hide all the supplies for the office supplies or the cleaning supplies? Is there ample space for the managers to work and the leasing agents to work? Does it work well and is it laid out well that when the tenants come in, they get their cookies and they get a drink and they have a nice opening to sit down with the property manager and talk about the property? You just want to understand what the lobby looks like. Very often a new owner will come in and want to kind of redecorate the leasing area. This is your sales area. It's your first exposure to the property. And that can be very important towards increasing sales, especially if you're going to be pushing rents. Gym and pool, amenities. This is all kind of coming into is there a gym? Is there a pool in the property? Is there a dog run or a playground for the little kids? Playgrounds can be a nightmare. Why is a playground a nightmare? First of all, it's a liability issue. Secondly, it's just indicating that there's a lot of kids around. That can be a problem. There's loitering. The younger kids, it's fine, but the younger kids go to bed and the older kids come out. And is there a problem with loitering around the playground? You might want to come back at 10 o'clock on a Friday. Tuesday at 12 noon is nothing, but 11 o'clock on a Friday, that playground could look dramatically different. And then a laundry facility. Is there a laundry facility on the property? And what's the condition of that? I know several years ago it became very in style to kind of modernize and decorate and make your laundry facility a really cool place to hang out. Big screen TVs, they'd paint it in funky colors, they'd redo the floor, they'd bring in the new machines, and all of a sudden, the laundry facility became not a drab place, I have to go down to a laundry room, became kind of a fun place to hang out. I know that seems strange, it's like my liking to go on a property tour, but so too the laundry room. And the thought was, listen, everybody has to do laundry, and there's two choices. Either I'm going to take it out to a laundromat, or I'm going to use the laundry room. And if the laundry room was an old, ugly, loud, hot place, I just feel disgusting going down there. Maybe I bring my laundry out. That means that the owner is not making as much money off you paying for laundry on the property. So I renovate the laundry room, and then all of a sudden I'm making more money off the laundry, and I just have a better tenant experience. So that's all of my common areas that I want to look at. And again, you're looking for specific things, either deferred maintenance that is a one-time capital cost that might have to be built into the expenses or the underwriting of the property, really the acquisition cost. Now I have my purchase price, and I was going to do a renovation. Now my renovation includes not just making some improvements to the property for the living experience, but now I have deferred maintenance that's going to have to be fixed. I'm going to have to put a new roof on. That's $15,000, or maybe it's $50,000 or more. I need to renovate the lobby. And you know what? The heating systems are going to be changed out. Whatever it is, just think through, is this a change in my underwriting of the income or expenses based on what I learned on the property tour? Or is it more of an upfront cost that's going to go into the acquisition of the property? I think of it, startup cost versus ongoing operational costs. So to here, acquisition cost, capital cost versus ongoing recurring expenses. Finally, I'm going to get to my units. And again, we're talking multifamily, but this line of thinking would apply to whatever type of unit you have, a hotel room, a retail unit, an office space, whatever it might be. I want to look at the kitchens, the baths, the flooring, the lighting, and the floor plans. Okay, we're done. Now, let's go back over it. I want to take a deep dive in the kitchen. Kitchen could be two things I'm looking for: functionality, style. We spend a lot of time in our kitchens. People love to eat. They love to cook. The kitchens and baths are usually the most important factors as to what will drive revenue. If I want to increase my rent, I can say, hey, listen, we put in brand new kitchens and brand new baths. We're raising rent $100. You'll be surprised. People will pay it. Either new tenants coming in or existing tenants in the property will say, hey, listen, I want that new kitchen. I'm willing to pay $100 more a month if you give me a new kitchen. And either they'll move into that unit, or most likely they'll just come renovate your kitchen in your unit. So kitchens, again, functionality, is the we walk through the units and we figured out that the ovens in most of the units we looked at really weren't working very well. The fridges looked like they were original from 25 years ago. They probably need to be replaced, and that's a cost. Again, is it a one-time kind of startup acquisition cost, or is it in your capital reserves number that you're just anticipating every year we're going to replace 2 fridges, 2 ovens, and you're just going to do that as units roll. That's typically how these things are done in multifamily. We say when the units roll over, meaning the current tenant leaves, we're going to go in there with a new kitchen or with a new oven, with a new stove, with new lighting, whatever it is. We're going to wait till the tenants leave, and then on that roll, on that turnover, while we're leasing it up, we're going to try to get more rent because we're going to renovate that unit. And as I do that over a 1, 2, or 3 year period, hopefully the whole property could turn over, and I've renovated the whole property over time. Flooring and lighting, just what it sounds like. It could be carpet floors, very common in the Northeast, at which point those carpets don't last forever. Either the style changes or the functionality changes, they just get worn out. Or the style changes. Yeah, we had dark brown carpets, but those are really old. Now we put in lime green carpets or whatever you like these days. Lighting, similar. I mean, it's such a simple thing to do to modernize the look and feel of an apartment. Just change the lighting. It makes such a dramatic difference, and it's usually not very expensive. You can go to Home Depot or wherever you need to go. It's not a plug for Home Depot. Wherever you need to go and just improve the lighting with more modern lighting, more efficient lighting. So what do I mean by floor plans? You can look on paper and say, okay, it's a 1 bedroom with a 1 bath and a 1 bedroom, 2 bath, and it's a 2 bedroom den. You can look at it on paper, and you can even look at the floor plans on paper. And some people are skilled enough to look at a floor plan on kind of a sketch and realize, like an architectural blueprint almost, and realize they don't like the floor plan, and that's enough to not want to buy the property. I was never that skilled. I'm more visual. I like to go walk it. And then you can feel dramatically, oh, wait, this layout, it's nice that it's big and it's nice that it's got 2 bedrooms, but it's a really awkward layout. I don't like, you open the kitchen door and it's banging into the light. You open the dishwasher and it hits the oven, whatever it is. You don't notice those things often until you're in the property. You might not notice, the windows, yeah, it's overlooking, it's nice that it has a big window, but I'm looking at the parking lot, or I'm looking at the garbage of the next door unit, whatever it might be. Sometimes you don't notice those things until you walk the property itself, and not just 1 or 2 units. Sometimes you have to walk a lot more units in different sections of the property. You didn't realize this unit is right next to the dog park. And that can explain why that unit gets $10 less every month in rent. Or this unit is overlooking the pool, which is really nice. That unit gets $15 more in rent. You might not understand those things in the rent roll until you get to look at the entire property, and then it will kind of fit together. In any case, I hope that is a deep explanation of why I like property tours so much, because they're a lot of fun. You get to see how different owners operate their property and what they do to the property. I like it because this is, to me, the thinking part of real estate. This is the very real. Get out of the office, get away from your computer, get out there and see how properties really function and operate, and just see what different people do to different properties. You come up with a lot of ideas. And you may be an investor or an aspiring investor in real estate one day, either your own properties or as an LP into other people's GPs. And you're just learning. Take this as a learning experience. Don't look at it as part of the job. This is an opportunity for free, literally, for you to go tour properties and learn how different properties operate, what different amenities and features. And again, this is really important because a lot of times you'll notice, like I mentioned, the laundry facilities being renovated in a really hip, cool way. It just became a fashionable kind of in-style thing to do. You don't know that until you get out to the properties and see what different owners are doing. And you will notice dramatic differences, especially as you go to the larger apartment properties that are managed by the professional REITs and the professional, management companies. Uh, you'll notice how they operate, how they lease, how they sell, how they clean. It's dramatically different, and you'll just get a feeling for different companies and and how they operate, and it can make a dramatic difference. And that it really affects even when you go to either buy a property or to advise your client. You know if this property was owned by such and such large owner operator, or that they do a top notch job. You know if you're buying that property that there's no deferred maintenance, that things have been extremely well maintained, and you also know that rents have probably been pushed to the max already. So it's going to be hard to make further improvements on that property. Take a different, this has been a strategy for years, right? The transition in the 90s and 2000s from family owned and operated real estate into REITs, or public company owner, commercial, big company owner operating. So it was very common to see properties that were owned by a family for a long time. They built it and they owned it, and they own, take the Kushner family. And this is nothing against Kushner, but they owned a lot of property. They were a big business, by already in the 90s and 2000s when they sold their portfolio. But they still ran very much like a mom and pop because it was family run. And there's often opportunities for the REITs to come in with the massive economies on a national scale, and let's just call it more professional owner operating, to come in and make significant improvements on those properties. Not always true, but very often the case. So the owner of the property and how they maintain the property gives you a good indication of kind of what's going to be the new experience for the new owner. And also you need to translate that into how it's going to affect the numbers. Again, the numbers both on an upfront capital that might be needed to fix and to cure deferred maintenance, to make improvements, two different things: deferred maintenance or to make necessary improvements with the goal of reducing expenses or increasing rents. Anyways, that's the property tour. Good luck. Thank you.